So I think there are quite a few people that need to mute their microphones. I'm getting lots of feedback. Um, so good afternoon, everybody. I think I'm not sure. I'm guessing your first years, but I think good opportunity for me to introduce myself. My name's Chef Shaun Kenworthy. I'm from the UK originally, but I've spent in October this year the last 20 years of my life working around India. Living in Calcutta, which is obviously still my favorite city, I think. So I think I'll tell you a little bit about my life story, I think, or my journey in the industry, which I still think is an incredible opportunity, an incredible industry, even today. So I started off, good God, I mean, my career. So I think I should just tell you a few little bits and pieces about me. So I grew up in a small town just outside of Manchester in the UK, a town with about 12,000 people living in it. And if you think about 12,000 people anywhere in India, that could be like living in a building almost to a certain extent. So it was a small town. It was a small working class town. My father was a steel worker, and my mother worked in an old people's home. And she was really there just to kind of like take care of the old ladies, make sure they were okay. So very simple, humble backgrounds I came from. One of my grandfathers was a miner, worked in the pits and drove a truck during the Second World War. And my other grandfather was a turner. He worked again in the steel industry. So like I say, very, very simple beginnings. The town I grew up in was interestingly a mill town. I think if anybody knows anything about the Industrial Revolution, then Manchester was the epicenter of that. That was pretty much where the Industrial Revolution started. So I grew up in a town with, I think when I was growing up, about 6 mills. And my mum, my grandparents, my grandmothers and aunts, they all worked in the mill at some point or other. My mother had as well. So as for me, not particularly academic, if I'm honest. Not like all you young smart kids, I don't think. Wasn't particularly academic when I was at school, in all honesty. Used to get bored really easily. I have quite a short attention span. So used to avoid going to school as much as possible, in all reality. And I had one of my grandmothers that I spent a lot of time with. I used to spend a lot of time with her during school holidays, etc. And I used to go to her house every day for lunch when I was at school. She was a great cook, and could pretty much cook anything, really. Interestingly, she loved Indian food, even though she'd not had that much experience of it. She loved Indian food. A couple of old aunts and my mother's were really good. Used to cook a lot. They used to cook a lot for the church. They were devout Catholics. They used to bake a lot. And in many ways, I think I put a lot of my inspiration down to my grandmother and those two aunts. I spent most of my early career as a pastry chef. Obviously, spending most of my life with my hands delving into bread and chocolate, etc. But my journey started, I guess, when I was about 14, I think. I started working in a pub kitchen, and just washing dishes for some extra pocket money when I was about 14. So that was my first taste of being in a kitchen ever, I guess. And I had that job for about 2 years. I used to work there on a Saturday lunchtime. As time went on, I became friendly with the chefs in the kitchen. There were 2 chefs in that kitchen, interesting. And they used to let me help out a little bit. They used to let me do salads and stuff to start off with. And then they used to let me kind of like serve the desserts. But obviously, I quite enjoyed the crack of being in the kitchen. We how do I explain that word? So there's always a lot of fun and banter in a kitchen. A lot of particularly during the morning when you're prepping up for service. There's a lot of kind of like obviously it's hard work, but there's a lot of fun elements. There's a lot of kind of like chatting that goes on and a lot of entertaining conversation. So I quite enjoyed that aspect of things. Like I said, when I left school at 16, with a couple of GCSEs, I didn't not particularly, like I say, not particularly academic. But I was lucky enough to start a craft course. I spent 2 years doing a craft course at a culinary college, if you like, just outside of Manchester, Tameside Technical College it was. And during that time, I used to spend maybe 50 hours a week working. So I used to go to college full time, but work every evening. And I used to spend my weekends at running between 2 hotels. So if you think about it, so let me explain my part-time jobs that I had. So from being 16, I had a part-time job working in a supermarket kitchen on a Saturday lunchtime and a little bit during the holidays sometimes. I used to work pretty much every evening of the week, whether it be working on banquets, doing some banquetings, waiting tables, serving tables. Saturday night, I had a job. A Friday and Saturday night, I had a job at a place called the Row Cross. It was a restaurant, and I used to work in the restaurant. Again, waiting tables, serving tables. And then I think when I was 17, like in my second year of college, I got this great opportunity to go and work or spend the weekends working in between 2 restaurants. So they were about, I guess, 40 kilometers away from my house. We used to finish college early on a Friday lunchtime. I'm going to take my glasses off. I don't need them. And then it was like 2 trains to get to a place called Hamforth. And over the weekend, I'd stay in the hotel. It was called the Belfry Hotel. My afternoon would start. I think we'd reach there about 4:30. I was in the pastry, interestingly. So my first job was to whip some cream for service and dip some fruits for petit fours. So that was kind of like, so you boil some sugar, take it to hard crack, dip little bunches of grapes and strawberries in this hard cracked sugar. I used to dip some fruits in some chocolate. They were like the petit fours. So it was like they came with your coffee at the end of the meal, which I thought was interesting, something completely new for me. Working class lad, never been in a restaurant like that before. And I used to work between 2 hotels. So I think on Friday evening, I used to work at the Belfry. Saturday morning, I'd work a bread shift. In the afternoon, so bread shift would be 5:30 starting in the morning to make bread. And then I'd work through the lunch. I think we get about an hour in the afternoon just to take some rest. And then in the evening, I'd go to another hotel, which was about 3-kilometer walk away from the Belfry, called the Stanleylands. And I'd do the service there in the pastry kitchen. Again, started off by dipping petit fours, whipping some cream for service, and just getting the section set up for service. So it was always great fun. Sunday morning, breakfast shift I used to be on, 5:30 in the kitchen, reporting time. So over that weekend, I think I used to work about 36 hours or something. Friday evening, all day Saturday, and Sunday, I think we used to finish about 3:30 and head back, and I'd be back to college the next day. And it was great fun. I remember, and these were some serious chefs actually that we're working with between these 2 restaurants. They were looked upon as being probably the best restaurants in the area in Cheshire, where I grew up. And it was my first, let's say, professional kitchens I ever worked in. Really, it was a great training ground. It was great fun. I loved it. Loved working with the team, working with the chefs. And I think I found out early on that this whole thing about being a chef is a really great team environment. It's chefs definitely people in our industry, they have to work together as a team. You have to get to achieving a goal as a team, or else you can't do it. It's not a let's say batsman cricket playing kind of like job that we do, where you're a lone assailant in what you do. We have to work together as a team, and I love that team environment. I think speak to any chefs, speak to any of the chefs at college, speak to Chef Cac, and I think again that team environment is something that everybody will be excited about and will always reminisce about. I think. Going back to growing up in that small town, I think the first restaurant meal we ever had, I was probably about 10 years of age, was in an Indian restaurant. So obviously the UK and India has a great like long-term connect, I guess. The British have been eating curries for maybe 120 years, I think. Um, so I think Indian food was by far the most prevalent of any food you'd ever find in any small town in the UK when I was growing up, and still the same today to a certain extent. We have great Indian restaurants in the UK, and they get better every year. So I left college, 18 years of age, got my first full-time job working at a small country house hotel in a place called Linton near Wetherby in the UK. I think spent about 6 months working there. I used to live in. It was again like a great family. This whole group of us that used to live in the hotel. The hotel was almost in the middle of nowhere. Actually, it was about 2 kilometers away from anything else in its own kind of like countryside. So there was a bunch of youngsters that lived in that hotel. We partied hard together and we had some great fun. And obviously we worked incredibly hard as well. I think I worked there for about 6 months. And then I got a job working at the Portland Hotel in Manchester. So I went back to Manchester, pretty much where I grew up, really. And spent 2.5 years at the Portland Hotel. And pretty much learnt all the basics there, I think. Worked with, again, in the pastry kitchen, worked with a good team of pastry chefs. Learned all my basics. I think by now I'm 18. I've been working in the kitchen pretty much for 4 years, like I said. Learned all those great basics that every chef needs to know. I remember being covered in choux pastry all over my arms every Monday and covered in meringue every Tuesday because we used to prep for the week. I'm going back to 1988 now, so long before any of you lot were even thought about before your parents ever thought about having children. And that makes me feel old anyway, at least, even if hopefully I don't look so old. So I spent 2.5 years at the Portland Hotel. After leaving there, worked for a local bakery, or a new bakery that had just opened called Monsieur Miel, Mr. Honey, it was called. Beautiful French confectionery. Again, upping my game a little bit, I think, making beautiful classical French confectionery and boulangerie or bread and pastry products. And after leaving there, decided that I felt like opening my own restaurant. My own bakery. Oh no, sorry, no. In between, I worked at a place called the Old Edge Hotel, again pastry kitchen. By this point of time, I think I must have been, how old would I have been? I think 20 years of age, 20 or 21 I would have been. And that was my first job as a pastry chef. I had my own little team in that hotel. There was 2 French guys in my little team, and an English guy. Again, worked there for 2.5 years. Left there when I was 22, I think, 22 and a half, I think. But again, I guess honed my skills, I think, in many ways. Like I say, by the time I was that age, I've been working in the kitchen for years, in all reality. So my life story is very different from any of yours. Decided that I was going to open a bakery. Opened a bakery, had it for about a year. Me and a friend, we became partners. We ran like a wholesale bakery, supplying hotels in Manchester with beautiful bread products. We ran it for about a year and sold it. We actually made a little bit of money, not much, but we made a little bit of money. And I think I decided then that if I really wanted to further my career, I guess, then I'd probably have to go and work in London. London was a place, and still is a place. It's like the epicenter of the best restaurants, some of the best restaurants in the world, some of the best F&B, if you like, in the whole world was there. And obviously, you'd work with some great teams. You meet some incredible professionals, some great individuals. And obviously, if you wanted to make a career out of the job that we did, then you'd probably have to spend some time in London, particularly if you'd have grown up in the UK at the time. The industry in those days was, you really did it for the love of the job. There was no money, in all reality. I think when I was growing up, there was no chefs to look up to. As of today, obviously, you have so many chefs on TV, so many books that you can read. But in those days, whatever information we got was primarily by working with some great teams of people, some great industry stalwarts, I guess, that had worked with some great teams and obviously gained experience from them. And if you had an afternoon off, you'd open up a couple of books that usually the chef would have in the office, some cookbooks, and try and work out some dishes or things to put on menus. So obviously, we really weren't as spoiled as you guys are today. And everything was very procedure driven, very professional. Some of these guys have been working in great kitchens going back to like the 1950s or something, to a certain extent, when the industry was very professional and organized in London in those days. And like I say, I think today that there's so much information out there, but I don't think you get the kind of experience that I guess I was lucky enough to have from those people. Like I say, the industry's changed drastically. And as of today, there's quite a bit of money to be made in the industry. If you want to be a professional, you can make quite a bit of money doing that. So went to London. My first job in London was working with some friends at a small restaurant called Horner's in London. I was there for just a couple of months, I think, in all reality. And I got an opportunity to work in what was probably one of the most talked about restaurants in London at the time, a restaurant called Bibendum. Still open today, still probably one of my favorite restaurants. Even today, I think. And whenever I'm in London, I try to go to Bibendum, even if it's just to have some oysters or something. But that was kind of like an incredible experience. Somebody just sent me a message then. Just 1 second. Anyway, so an incredible experience in that space. The menu used to change every day. So again, it was very different kind of like process and procedure for me. I'd never worked in a restaurant where the menu changed every day. We used to have great suppliers coming from all over the southeast of England to bring in beautiful foods, beautiful ingredients every day. And most of that we didn't even order. The suppliers would just bring them when they come into season, and we'd say, "Oh, brilliant!" So whatever, white asparagus is in season. Fresh porcini's in season. Brilliant. You bring us a case a day until it runs out of season, and then and bring us whatever's next. So it's a beautiful environment to work in. Beautiful environment to work in. Incredibly challenging that place was, because you had to constantly keep thinking about new things to put on the menu. And like I say, in those days, that there wasn't so much information out there. You'd have to like thumb through books or just try things yourself. Sometimes they work, sometimes they didn't. But like I say, just such an incredible training ground. I'm going back to like 1993. Spent a year at Bibendum. And in those days, it wasn't really about applying for jobs. It was really about the kind of people that you work with, the kind of people that you met. And hopefully from meeting people, you'd probably get an opportunity to go meet somebody else in the industry. You might get a connection to somebody else in the industry. You might be lucky enough to get an opportunity to work in the industry or work in a different restaurant. And a lot of it was kind of like about making connections, maybe knocking on some doors to see if there was an opening, a good opportunity in a new restaurant that had just opened. So 1 year at Bibendum, so I saw the whole seasonal change. 1 year was enough in a restaurant like that, I think. So I saw the whole 4 seasons come and go, which is never such a bad thing to do in a restaurant. And really, by the end of that year, we'd seen all the seasons come and go, all those fresh, beautiful vegetables, all those fresh fruits that came and went through the seasons, fish, whatever had come and gone in and out of season. Like I say, I think that kind of experience was, I think that was probably between that and another restaurant that I worked in a little bit later, were probably the best experience times of my life, where I really gained lots of knowledge. Not necessarily only from people, but from myself, really, just through trying, swapping, changing different things to create new dishes. I went on there to go back to Manchester, and we opened a restaurant called Mash and Air, which was the first microbrewery in Manchester. The first microbrewery in the UK at the time it was. Obviously, as in India today, you have lots of microbreweries cropping up in Bangalore, up in Punjab, Pune, Delhi, Mumbai. But this was the first one in the UK. And if you try and understand how maverick that was, I guess, as of today in the UK, there's about 2,500 microbreweries. So that space particularly was maverick. It didn't open in London, which everybody thought was crazy not to open that space first in London. Manchester was a much, let's say, I think it's probably the third most populated city in the UK. London, then Birmingham, then Manchester. But it was kind of like the talk of the city for maybe for a good 2 or 3 years. I mean, it was amazing how much of an impact that restaurant had, not just in Manchester, but the whole country knew about Mash and Air. It was split over 4 levels. We had a microbrewery that ran all the way up through the centre of the building. We had a fine dining restaurant called Air on the top floor. We had a restaurant called Max, which was a very casual dining, Californian style grill, really good simple salads, beautiful plates of food. I was a pastry chef there again. We did some incredibly interesting things at that time. I then went to work for a restaurant called Quaglino's in London after this. So I went back to London. We opened another Mash in London, actually, interestingly. And I became the corporate pastry chef of over 3 restaurants: Coast, the Atlantic Bar and Grill, Mash and Air, and obviously the Mash in Manchester, so 4 restaurants. And then got an opportunity to work at what was probably the talk of London at the time, a restaurant called Quaglino's. We used to do about 400 customers every day for lunch. 600-700 customers every night, every evening. It was like a crazy restaurant, really. Tons of pressure, incredibly aggressive space to work in. We'd start work at 8:30 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, and you probably wouldn't get out of the kitchen before 1 a.m. the following morning. That was if you was on like an all-day shift. A split shift in that space was just like a few minutes if you were lucky to catch it. Maybe in the summer you could even go and lie in the park in Green Park or for 15-20 minutes, but that was about all we had. The industry, thankfully, is a lot more it's a lot more evolved these days. I think working hours are a lot better than they ever were. But again, going back to those days, I think we worked. It wasn't necessarily mainly about career. It was about the love of the job. I think the job that we do is incredibly creative. You get the opportunity to be creative on a daily basis if you're lucky. And while I was working in that restaurant, I was there for 2.5 years almost. In the last, just before I left, actually, I got an invite to be part of something called the World Gourmet Summit in London. In Singapore, that happens every year. We were a guest restaurant, and I met lots of people from around Asia. It was a great, the World Gourmet Summit that year was probably one of the best they'd ever been. There was some incredible restaurants that participated from around the world. And I met a guy from Delhi called Rohit Khattar. He had a couple of family restaurants, but he also had the, he kind of like had the franchise to run all the F&B at India Habitat Centre in Delhi. And obviously, beyond that, he went on to open Indian Accent, which is probably India's finest restaurant today, I think. He invited me to India. He said, come and see what we're doing in Delhi. I'll pay for your flight. And I went there for a couple of weeks. This crazy place. I'd never seen anything like India. It was incredible for me. But I got a great opportunity. So when I'd gone back to the UK, he'd sent me an opportunity to go and work in Delhi for a year. And we floated this contract backwards and forwards for about 3 months, and eventually in October 2000, I took a complete career change in life, decided to go and spend 1 year in India. And I guess that was the start of massive change for me, really. As of today, I've spent the last 20 years in India, which is quite incredible. I can't believe it myself. Spent that 1 year with India Habitat Centre. I spent 5 years beyond that with the Park Hotel Group based in Calcutta. And that's to a certain extent why Calcutta became home for me, as the executive chef of the Park Hotel in Calcutta. During that time, we opened the Park Hotel in Chennai. We relaunched Fleury's, which I know a lot of people in Calcutta will recognize the name Fleury's. And at the end of that time, I was married. My wife's Bengali, interestingly. We decided let's spend some more time in India. I thought about opening a restaurant. I did that in 2006. I opened a restaurant in Calcutta called the Blue Potato. And on the back of that, I had lots of friends asking me to help them open restaurants, which then became, I guess, a bit of a career for me in all reality. I think as of today, during that time when I had the Blue Potato, I started taking classes at IAM, interestingly, in Calcutta. With a batch of third-year students that was made up from some students from IHM, some students from IAM in Calcutta. And I guess that's why I'm here today, really. So for the last, what will it be now? I think it must be 15 years, I think. Maybe 15 years. I've been associated with Dr. Bose. We've worked a lot together on many things. I've had great students that have come out of IHM over the years. And it's been a great opportunity for me to give back a little bit. Obviously, I've spent, as of this year, way too many years in the industry, well over 30 years, I think. So I think it was a great opportunity to give back. Spend time with you guys. Obviously, I think I'm always here for everybody. If anybody ever wants to know anything or has any questions to ask, you can get in touch with me through Instagram or Facebook. But make sure your questions are valid questions, nothing nonsense. And obviously, that whole journey of kind of like IHM that's carried on, all the competitions that we've done, right from Young Chef to obviously the Teacher Chefs competitions, to the Young Chef Olympiad, which everybody should be excited about. And over the years, while I've been obviously had this great relationship with IHM, I've been also consulting for many, many different restaurants, confectionaries, I mean, many different facets of F&B around India. Probably worked on over 100 projects over the years, I think, all these years. And I think if I reflect, if I look at the industry, obviously it's given me so much, I think. I think in those early days, as you need to think yourselves, I think joining this, I think in those early days, it can't possibly be about the money. it has to be about, it really has to be about trying to gain some experience, I think. Obviously, I think if your first years now, you leave here 2 years from now with a degree, I think nailing that first job is by far the most important thing you can ever do. And like I say, my life is very different from yours, I think. Obviously, I don't have a degree today. I never had a degree. And most of whatever I did was based on the experience that I had, and obviously working with some great teams of people. Obviously, that first job for you to get is by far the most important thing in your life. But I think once you've worked in the industry for 3, 4, 5 years, once you've gained some experience, whatever you do, and I'm not saying that anybody needs to be a chef if you join IHM, there's so many different aspects and facets to the industry, and so many different career opportunities that you have out there, that, I mean, the world really is your oyster. Obviously, we're going through this incredible crisis with the coronavirus at the moment. But in not such a long time, I don't think, obviously the world will get back to normal, and our industry will always be one of the most strong aspects of the world. Today, everybody still wants to travel. That's never going to stop, really. Maybe a year with this virus, it's going to be a bit of a challenge for a while, but people are going to get back to traveling, so hotels are going to be back. People are not going to stop eating out for sure. I remember my dad saying to me when I was young that at least if you're going to be a chef, you'll always have a job. People will always want to eat. And I don't think that's ever changed throughout the years. I mean, if you think about it, you do this course, you spend 3 years. Hopefully in the second year, you get a great opportunity to work in a really good hotel somewhere around the world, do your industrial experience. By the end of that, you'll be looking for a job. If you get a great opportunity as an operational trainee or as a management trainee somewhere, then that's the best opportunity for you. I know lots of our youngsters today have already worked out for themselves that they would like to be a sommelier before they join the course. That's a drastic change than 14 years ago when I started working with IHM, 14, 15 years ago. That they want to be a sommelier, that they want to work in events, that they might find working in housekeeping an interesting option. There are opportunities on ships. You can get to float around the world and make money doing that. There are great opportunities internationally with hotels and restaurants. You can go into the military if you wanted to, become a chef in the military. I mean, there's so many different aspects and the most diverse in many ways. I almost took a job many, many years ago working on an oil rig. It was paying really good money. And basically you're at sea for something like, so it was an oil rig at sea. And I think it was like a 6-month contract that you signed on for. For 6 months, you just worked. You prepared meals for the 2,000 staff that were on the oil rig. But incredible, there were like cinemas on that oil rig. I mean, the kind of facilities they had for the staff was incredible. It paid really well. You got to work for 6 months, and you got 6 months off at the end of it. I almost took a job working on a cruise liner once, many, many years ago when I was about 20. And in some ways, well, I don't know whether it would have been the job for me, but again, great opportunities, some good money you can earn on a cruise liner. I'm sure many of you might have families that have restaurants that you're going to go into a restaurant industry, or you might have ideas of opening up your own confectionery or opening up your own restaurants. So all those options are there for you. Like I say, this coronavirus will come and it will pass. I think that's something, obviously, we're all getting bogged down with reading into too much news, I think, today about this virus. But it will come and go. And at some point in time, they'll work out how to manage this. Obviously, India's just gone into lockdown until the 31st of this month. But I think by next month, things will start getting back to normal and life will continue almost probably as it has done in the past. Our industry will flourish. If you look at the kind of like online sales that Zomato and Swiggy are doing pan India today. You can't. Restaurants never expected to do that kind of like online sale. So the industry, I think every sector is going to be challenged a little bit by this virus, but it's something that's going to pass, and we'll all be back to thinking professionally about careers, etc. Not far in the future. So I have a few questions that Chef Kak has just sent me. Where do you suggest one should start a career in case one's interested to learn pastry and bakery? So, I mean, obviously that hotel sector is probably the best place for you guys to start your career, I think. Nail that best opportunity in a hotel, the best opportunity you can. If you can get to work for some of the larger international brands like Hyatt, Marriott, I think they're usually quite confectionery focused. They have great bakeries, great confectionaries. So I think Marriott, Hyatt, Marriott, those, I mean, international groups, I'd say would probably be the best places to work. But any of the hotel companies have great bakery, pastry section. I think one of the cool things about working in India is that we still make everything from scratch. If you live in a country like America, a lot of the stuff you buy in from outside and you just play around with it and put it onto plates. So I think one of the best things about starting your career in India is that we start everything from scratch. And that to a certain extent is the same for all of Asia. So we can be thinking about Singapore, Thailand, even China's today, great opportunities in China. I know a lot of the world talks badly about China, but you can't imagine the kind of hotels that they have in China. So I think nail yourself a great job in a hotel and start from there. What changes do you think will occur in the management and operations after the pandemic? So like I say, I think this is something that obviously everybody's worried about at the moment. I think no matter where you are in the world, no matter what sector you're in, I think, and I've been saying this to so many people, I think if any industry has a big elastic band to it, attached to it, then our industry is that industry. Like I say, people will always want to eat. They'll always want to travel. They'll always want to go out. This virus is not going to stop that in the long term. I think not far after this, not far in the future, we'll all start thinking about traveling again, and life will start getting back to normal. I don't think that's far away at all in all reality. Obviously, temporary, there's going to be a bit of an issue, but other than that, I think it's fine. In Bangalore, I've been working on some menus this week for like home delivery models. In Bangalore, they've started selling beer for kind of like pickup because there's so many microbreweries in that city. So things are starting to slowly wangle their way back, slowly and quietly. I might have to put my glasses on actually. What changes do you think? Okay, we've done that. Also, what changes in kitchen hygiene? So I think what the pandemic is going to do, and in many ways, I think it's going to be a great rectification for the industry in India. I think the customer is going to dictate terms a lot more. They're going to want to know what kind of practices you have in-house as far as hygiene and cleanliness are concerned. I sadly think that the street food sector will be affected quite badly from this because people are not going to want to be socializing on the street, on the roadside, eating what, to a certain extent, has always been relatively unhygienic processes in creating that food. I think a lot of customers will be very wary of that. I think if they're entering a restaurant space, they want to see that somebody has, you're going to need basic kind of like cleaning stations when you're entering the restaurant. The staff have to look cleaner and more hygienic than they've ever looked before. And obviously that kind of like interaction is not going to be there as much as it used to be. The staff are going to have to socially distance from each other. The customers are going to have to socially distance in these initial stages. So I think just that hygiene and cleanliness aspect are going to be paramount. I've been advising people over the last couple of weeks to start putting videos online of how your kitchen looks, the kind of processes that your staff are taking when they enter the kitchen environment. Obviously, washing their hands, wearing face masks, wearing hairnets, maybe even wearing coverings on their shoes. Obviously, washing stations when the staff are entering. So I've been advising people to start posting things like this on their social media already. I think in another couple of weeks, restaurants will slowly start to open again, and things will start getting back to normal. Your advice, if a fresher wants to start his own bakery and confectionery, I think get some experience first. You need to learn your trade. In the kitchen, we talk quite militarily. We talk about you need to gain your stripes. You need to earn your stripes, which is an important thing for everybody, I think. And you need to go through that process of learning your trade. The trade that we do is a craft skill. You need to learn that craft. And you need to spend some years after that honing that craft as well. You need to obviously learn the basics and start making up your own decisions beyond that. But I think realistically, it takes at least 5 or 6 years to learn some good basic knowledge before you should start thinking about opening your own restaurant space. But I mean, that's how I think. Does anybody have any more questions? Chef Kak, I can see you online there.
I can hear you, and can you hear me, Chef?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, so one last question which I'm directly reading from the chat is, do we get better opportunities after this pandemic gets over? So should we, although it's going to be a little tough this year, should we, do something of our own in the beginning and then start looking for a better job?
So obviously, this pandemic is in the really early stages at the moment, and I think obviously, I mean, I'm doing the same. I'm actually stuck in the UK at the moment. I got stuck here. My father was unwell. He unfortunately passed away, and me and my wife, we got stuck here because India's not allowing flights to land. But I think that we've all gotten so bogged down with watching and listening to the news on a daily basis. I've been watching twice as much as anybody else because I've been watching the UK news as well, because that's where I am at the moment. But I think this is still in the very early stages. I think a month from now, the whole situation will look very differently. And I think if we think maybe 3 or 4 months into the future, obviously the world needs to get back to doing things almost as normal as possible. People need to get back to work. And I don't think it's too long until people will be back to work. So I don't think there's too much to worry about. Obviously, short term, there's going to be obviously some challenges, but I think in just a few months from now, the whole world will be back to normal. And obviously, a lot of economies need to pay off all those debts they've gotten themselves into. So there's no choice, realistically. And that's even more so in India, because a lot of people still earn hand to mouth. They earn on a daily basis. They can't be, a government's not going to furlough them for 6 months. They're not going to pay their salaries for 6 months. So the Indian economy, quite rightfully, needs to get back on its feet ASAP. And if I know Indian businessmen as well as I think I know them, they're incredibly aggressive, and they'll be kind of like, out of this, there's going to be obviously lots of changes, I think, to the industry, but the industry will come back much stronger than ever.
Any more questions? Any more questions? If you have any questions, you can put on the chat, or otherwise, if that is it, then we will have a note of thanks for Chef Shaun.
I think we've only got about 5 minutes left in this Zoom meeting anyway. Yeah. So quickly, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so there are coming, Chef.
Thank you.
On behalf of everyone here at IHM, we are looking forward to see you in your whites again And
Not,
in
not,
India,
not
you have to take the first flight outside from there and come to Calcutta, and
of
we
course,
will
of
be
course, of course.
and
So,
we'll
so,
be.
so, so our main worry at the moment is obviously our home in Calcutta. Obviously, there's going to be sounding like the storm's going to hit tonight, but we want to be back home. I'm
Yeah.
kind of like in the UK, but it's hardly home for me anymore. Calcutta is very much home for me.
So we are looking forward to see you again, and please be safe in the meantime. And thank you very much for taking our time today and
But like
speaking to all of
yeah.
us.
Okay,
Speaking
but
to
like
all of us.
I think to everybody, obviously, the whole pandemic is such a concern for everybody at the moment. It's the thing that's most in people's minds. But I think if we look at not necessarily short-term future, but just a few months from now, the whole thing is going to look very different. And I think in another 2 or 3 months, people are not really going to be talking about this pandemic at all. Maybe even sooner than that,
You,
because
al-
life has to get back to normal.
you
People need to
although
start
although
going
you
out.
are although you are stuck there in the UK, but we are seeing a lot of your videos, small videos, your pictures, out of the fridge cooking, not out of the box, out of the fridge cooking,
Yeah,
and
so I think that's a great opportunity for all the youngsters to really get on social media and obviously try and set your footprint on social media. Obviously, you're all going to have to do this in the future. I've got so many things lined up in the next week or two that are all going to be social media based. Follow some interesting people, I think, and obviously it's going to be a great opportunity for you to learn things in at the start of your career, which is going to be a great one.
thank you very much, Chef. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. Although I have heard it before, but then I'm sure it was very, very interesting for others. And we are, I'm sure many of them have taken their lessons from whatever they had. You talked about resilience. You talked about learning. You talked about, how we should take smaller steps. We should not talk too much about how much salary, etc., etc. It's all about a lot about learning in the beginning.
Of course, of
And,
course, and
yeah.
like say that the trade that me and Chef Kak have had all our life, it's a trade that you have to learn. It's not something that you can just learn out of a book. You have to physically cook for a living
Yeah.
for
And
a while.
there is no shortcut. You will have to, as Chef said, you will have to work really hard towards your success. You will have to work hard towards picking up the threads of the talent that you need to do. Pick up the trade slowly and steadily, and that's how everything happens. And I thank you all for
So,
listening
so,
to
so, so, so
Chef Shaun.
just as a last note, so I know that most of your parents wanted you to be engineers and doctors, um, and accountants, etc. But it's no, it doesn't matter what you join. Those early years, you have to work incredibly hard. You have to hone those skills. I think that you learn if you want to be the best doctor in the world or the best engineer. You really need to strive and work hard to that. Nothing comes easy in this world, whether it be cooking in a kitchen, whether it be, I mean, it doesn't matter if you want to be an astronaut. Nothing comes easier. I don't think there's a free meal for anybody out there. So everybody's going to have to work hard, whatever they do. And I don't think our industry is necessarily any harder than any other if you want to achieve something and make a name for yourself.
Right. Thank you very much for your time, Chef. And I'm sure all of them have picked up a page from your experience, and they will somewhere use it in their own life. Pick up the thread somewhere. And I wish all of you best. We wish to see all of you back in the college soon. And all the best to you for your future. And thank you very much, Chef Shaun. Thank you very
And,
much,
and,
all of
and,
you.
look, and look forward to seeing you all in India sometime soon. And good luck.
Yes.
All the
Okay.
best.
Of course. All the way. All the best. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.